Hey there, coaches. I'm Rich Prado, owner of Play in School and host of Travel Ball Talk, where I talk to travel ball coaches from the best organizations about the current and future state of travel baseball. Today's guest is from right here in my backyard in Richmond, Virginia. Rich Graham runs the Virginia Cardinals and RBA South. Graham was an early adopter of using college recruiting videos for all of his guys. And in fact, the Cardinals are my longest running partner for filming. You can see all of their guys at playinschool.com/Cardinals. And we'll be updating their film this spring. Now, the foundation of the Cardinals is a pretty interesting story. Having witnessed it firsthand in those early days, I can say that if someone were able to replicate that model, they would have lightning in a bottle. I hope you enjoy this episode of Travel Ball Talk. All right, welcome back to another episode of Travel Ball Talk. Today we're staying local here in Richmond, Virginia. Head coach, founder of the Virginia Cardinals and RBA South, Rich Graham. Good friend of mine, old friend of mine. Moonlight, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Doing good, Richie. Thanks for having me, man. I'm pleased that you finally got around to interviewing me. It seems like you went up and down the whole East Coast and finally got back to me. I appreciate it.
Well, you know, I text you all the time. You never text me back, so.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's not true.
Okay. Well, we so just tell everybody we were hanging out Friday night. Local school here, VCU, Virginia Commonwealth Rams, just opened up a new facility, indoor hitting facility. For those of you who are unfamiliar with VCU, they play in it's a former AAA, current AA facility, home of the Richmond Flying Squirrels, formerly Richmond Braves. So they play down the street a little way. So, VCU has always been known for basketball, and Coach Stifler over there at VCU he's been doing a great job since he took over, and they just opened. Yeah, he's killing it. And they just put together a beautiful on-campus training facility, hitting facility, and all the likes, and an on-campus locker room for them to use when they're, using that facility and in the weight room. So we, Rich and I were over there, sort of an unveiling or happy hour for the local coaches. Local high school and travel guys all met over there. So we got to spend some time, and afterwards we went right next door, literally in the same building just about, and went and watched some VCU basketball, which was pretty fun. So it was fun hanging out the other night. Got to see a lot of really, old friends, good friends in the baseball community. So that's when you pinned me down and said, "Hey, you gotta have me in." And so embarrassingly,
it's an interesting. It was an interesting event because it was great. Yeah, the facility's awesome. I mean, being able to have the clubhouse and the training room and the hitting facility right there in that same spot in the center of the campus for them is a real coup, which is awesome. I found the event itself was really interesting. It was a lot of fun. The fact that we all are kind of compete in the same area, in the same industry, and it was just really neat that everybody's shaking hands and then giving each other the stink eye from across the room. So I found it to be a really interesting dynamic of all the local travel coaches kind of being in the same room together. It was, I found it very interesting, frankly.
I'm kind of hoping that VCU hosts a happy hour every week. I mean, I had a good time. I mean,
that'd be great.
Yeah.
It was my first VCU basketball experience too. So that was interesting. I mean, I've heard about all the hype. I just never made my way over there to watch a game, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it was great. Yeah, it was good to see some people that you see around once in a while, but had some really good conversations. I actually spent a good amount of time talking to Evan Justice's dad. That was a great conversation with him about and Evan never played for me. He played for Rocket and Andrew Slater over there collegiate, and he was a kid that I always admired from a distance. And having met his dad, I get it now. I mean, great guy. Great conversation. He was filling me in on things down at NC State and how it's going for Evan and his experience down the Cape, which, if you ever get a chance to play down the Cape, you got to do it. I know when I played there back in the early 90s, it was even having gone on and played in the minor leagues, the summer I spent playing down Cape Cod League was the greatest baseball summer of my lifetime. It was awesome. And he and I had a really good conversation about travel ball, college ball, summer ball, and it was just a lot of fun, man. And those things always are, getting together with people who are baseball minded and, good people. It was a good time.
Hey, be mindful not to cover the mic up with your cheek while you're talking if you're on the phone. For those of you listening who aren't from around here, from Richmond, Virginia, Rich has made reference to Mr. Justice, Brian Justice, and he's talking about his son, Evan, who's down at NC State. Evan is a graduate of collegiate, and Brian teaches over collegiate. And some of you may have heard that school before because that is the alma mater of a former infielder who played there who also played at NC State and is now the quarterback for the Seahawks. So if you've heard collegiate but couldn't place it, it's Russell Wilson's alma mater, in addition to a bunch of other really good athletes and good ball players and such. But Evan,
they bring up Russell because we were talking about that fact, and a lot of people don't realize this. It's one of my favorite anecdotes. So you had mentioned that I own RDA South along with my partner Ron Mallon, and the very first summer we ever did summer camp. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but the very first summer we did summer camps, we had, our practice is always to have the local high school kids who've been, taking lessons from us and being in our camps and whatnot, help work the youth summer camps. And back then, our first one that year, we had Justin Verlander as one of our instructors. So he was a high school kid at the time at Goochland High School, and he was one of the coaches. And one of the kids on his team was a 10-year-old Russell Wilson. So,
wow.
I mean, you can't do much better than that as far as the Richmond area goes, of having Verlander as your coach and Russell Wilson is one of his students. And Russell's older brother, Harry, was one of our instructors as well. It was really kind of interesting. Made me kind of wish we had taken pictures back then. More group photos.
No doubt.
A good one.
No doubt. So you mentioned Ron, you mentioned RBA South. Why don't we take a step back in time and maybe jump back even before the
sure.
you guys took over RBA South, and I consider you part of the, and I say this lovingly, you're part of the Boston baseball mafia. So take us back to where you didn't know I said that? You didn't know you were part of the baseball?
No.
Oh yeah, the Boston baseball mafia. You're part of it.
Oh no, I know it. I know I am, and I know it exists. I just didn't know you knew about it.
Oh,
kind of try to keep it a secret.
Oh yeah. The Boston baseball mafia is for real. And they took over Virginia, especially at the college ranks, which you were a part of for a little while. And many of those guys have spread their wings, and now the Boston baseball mafia has taken over the country.
Right, it's true.
So
Tim Corbin's in Boston guy.
Gosh. Take us back to there. Give us the short bio for those of you who aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was born in Virginia, which a lot of people don't realize. But then, as a very young child, moved to New England, moved to New Hampshire, then moved to Massachusetts, went to high school there, and then went to UMass. So played my college baseball at UMass. Got drafted in '92 by the Seattle Mariners, along with I was drafted in the 31st round. Their first round pick that year was my teammate at UMass, a guy named Ron Vallone. And so we both got to start our professional careers together with the Mariners. And so I played with the Mariners for a while, I think 3 years in the minor leagues, got released, got picked up by the Astros after a year of independent ball, got released again, got picked up by the Red Sox, got released again. The classic minor league story. I wound up playing with 3 different organizations, played with 4 different independent teams while still chasing the dream. So, it was a lot of fun. I got to see the country, got to make a lot of really great friends, got to, take part in 3 different organizations and how they approach their player development process, which was very valuable for me. Got to meet a lot of coaches who've gone on to do some great things, and a lot of players who, went on to do some great things too in the game. And yeah, it was a great experience. And then, so when I stopped playing, it was 97, I believe was my last season. I happened to finish up out in the Pacific Northwest and got a job coaching the person who hired me, my first job, a guy named Travis Jewett. who is now the head coach at Tulane.
Yeah.
He hired me as the pitching coach at Edmonds Community College, and then very shortly after got another job at Gonzaga. So he left about a week after he hired me. And a buddy of mine who I played in the minor leagues with got promoted to be the head coach at the time, a guy named Hank King. And so Hank and I started off that year running Edmonds Community College, and then we wound up, long story, but we wound up having a bench clearing brawl, and the athletic director wound up dismissing Hank, and then I took over as the head coach. So I went from like working a 9 to 5 to being a pitching coach, then a week later getting promoted to the head assistant, and then like a month later being the head coach. And so it was kind of a crazy run out in Seattle. But I always knew I wanted to come back east, and at the end of that season, there was a position open, an assistant coach position open at U of R. So I applied for that. Got a reference from Tim Corbin, who was at Clemson at the time. Gave me a good reference with Coach Atkins over at U of R. So I joined that staff, coached there. And then when there was some turnover, Mark McLean left, went to VCU. I had the opportunity to buy into RBA South and open up the indoor academy here. So at that time, I was getting married and going to stay in the area, so I figured that would be, a more family-friendly job than, traveling quite as much as a college coach has to travel. So, made the move, opened the indoor academy, and then, kind of just took it from there. That was 20 years ago. So Ron and I have been doing RBA South for 20 years now, and it's been great. Can't complain.
And Ron has a pretty accomplished background as well with
he's from the New Jersey area. He's from Toms River, New Jersey area, and he wound up going to play at North Carolina. And he was the shortstop at North Carolina back when they first really started taking off as a program. He actually participated in the College World Series way back in the day. I joke with him back when they wore leather helmets. That's when he was in Omaha, back when Omaha still had a stagecoach and everything. So he had a great career at UNC. Still holds the hit streak record, I believe, something like 33 games. He got drafted and then went and signed with the Dodgers and played 10 years with them. Was in AAA for a good period of time. He had a very good career. Did a lot of things in the game. Was a multi-positional player. He went there as a shortstop and then became a utility guy. And yeah, he had a wonderful experience. He got to go to Australia and play. And then at the end of his career, he actually wound up playing in the major leagues over in Taiwan in Chinese Professional Baseball League and got in the top league over there, which is great. So, together he and I, we've had our time, in professional baseball and really enjoyed the opportunity to kind of come together and be on the same page when it comes to, not just running a business, but player development, trying to do what we can for the local kids. And, we like to say that the resurgence and the growth of Richmond being a baseball powerhouse, we've enjoyed being around during that period. There's a lot of good people in the business around here, a lot of good instructors, a lot of people who know what they're doing. And we've been really, really happy to be a part of it.
And a lot of indoor baseball, which you're a part of.
Yep.
And it's not an easy business. And at one point in time, there was, 3 or 4 people who hung a shingle right on the same road that you're on. And some...
4. Yeah, there's 5. There was 5 total. There's 4 now. One but yeah.
And to... On the one hand, it's it's pretty cool to see. On the other hand, I kind of shake my head at some of these guys that just they run a warehouse, and I guess I don't even know if you can call some of them businesses or whatever. But it is what it is, and but yes, this is maybe it's the climate. I don't know what it is, but there's a ton of indoor baseball here, and you and Ron have made a go out of it. Two full decades at this point.
I think it's a curse of making it look easy sometimes.
Yeah.
Bob Smith, the Godfather, opened up RBA, Richmond Baseball Academy originally, and then Ron and I were kind of second group in with him when Chesterfield County had nothing. Yeah. And, so we were the first ones in Chesterfield County to do something like this. And, sometimes you're the victim of your own success. We definitely had a lot of success going from a period of time where the decade prior to RBA in the South Side, RBA South, there have been a handful of kids who came through and went on and played in college. And then over the next 10 years, you're looking at 100 kids, so it really kind of turned around and changed. And then the last 10 years, it's been an explosion.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that Central Virginia has been a hotbed. The West End was always good. When you had Tuckahoe Little League,
right.
All of that, the South Side was a little behind 20 years ago, but it's about the same now, at least. And there's no doubt that Chesterfield County and Henrico and Hanover, have some of the best baseball players on the East Coast. And, it goes to show with, every year there's kids getting drafted out of here. Every year there's, a dozen or so kids going and playing Division I baseball just out of Chesterfield County alone. And, going on and having great careers. We had a pretty good streak here of having a first or second round draft pick who's from either our building or the West End RBA. I think it's like 5 years in a row. So that's not nothing. And, it's a testament to really the kids' willingness to put in the time, to make the effort, to get the instruction, to, do what they need to do to try to get to that next level. It's been pretty impressive. And that's the thing that I've found. We haven't got to get to the Cardinals yet, but, in 2014, we went down, we won the perfect game underclass world championship in Fort Myers. And, for me, it was not a surprise. It's not to sound arrogant about it, but I've been telling these kids for years, if you get the best players in Richmond on one team, they can compete with anybody.
That's a big time team. Yeah.
Yeah, they can compete with Florida kids. They can compete with Texas kids. They can compete with a team like the Canes, who gets kids from all over the country.
Yeah.
If you could lock down the best 12 to 15 players every year on one team, they can beat anybody. Plain and simple.
Well, the funny thing is, back in the day, we actually did. At 12, 13, and 14,
right.
We did. Right, so we're talking about early '90s, and we're talking about AAU baseball back in the day, and you want to hear about an explosion of baseball so I'm be 41 next week. So at 12 years old, we had one team in the state at 12U AAU. So we were
hard to believe,
right? That was it.
Hard to believe. You got three teams in every neighborhood. Man.
One team. And the next year there was so we didn't even have to qualify. We were the team. Then at 13U, that next year, there was a bunch of teams, and we had a tournament. We had to go like a small tournament. We had to go and win. And then at 14U, there was already, so in 3 years, a ton of teams. And by the way, that team at my 14-year-old year was coached by one of the guys that was with us at VCU Friday night, Donnie Phillips. Donnie and Tag Montague coached that team, and
oh man,
it was a really
the baseball world's so small because I had Tag Montague's job at U of R right after him.
Yeah.
So I inherited his closet and a lot of the clothes he left behind, and that's funny. And I've kept in touch with Tag over the years too. It's a small baseball world, man. I mean, especially when you get up to the higher levels. I mean, that's why I tell these kids all the time, you need to be careful, how you act, who you are, because especially at the higher levels, you're going to be bumping into these same people for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So you really need to mind your P's and Q's and be a decent human being and treat everybody with respect. And I'll tell you, that was the thing that I learned the most in professional baseball was, you don't know who you're talking to sometimes, especially when in the pro game. I remember the guy who picked me up at the airport when I got drafted and flew out to Arizona for minicamp in Peoria. I got picked up at the airport by a guy who was, at that time, basically an intern for the Mariners. Now, fast forward 10 years, and he was the general manager of the Florida Marlins. So
go figure.
It's like you've really got to be careful. I mean, the people that you deal with, the trainers, the support staff, they're professionals, and they're in the organization. They're going to be there a lot longer than you are. And, you need to make sure that you're not walking around thinking that you're better than anybody else, because you're not. And that dude might be your boss in a year or two. So, it's the same thing in college ball. You go to these tournaments with these kids, and they're looking around, and they're looking for, certain logos and stuff on college shirts behind the stands, and thinking it's all about whether the head college coach is there or, a recruiting coordinator is there. And it's not, man. Sometimes it's the coach in the other dugout that makes the call for you. Sometimes it's the umpire. I know these guys in this game that they know everybody, right? And if they get a phone call from somebody that they know and they trust, and they're like, hey, I saw a kid this past weekend at such and such a field, and he's on this team. You need to go check him out. They do it, So you're always being evaluated. You're always being watched, and you just need to kind of respect that, and you need to make sure you're going about your business in the right way.
Yeah, let's take a step back for a second. You talked about how if we could get just a team of Richmond guys. Well, you went and got a team of just Virginia guys. So we're talking about just about a decade ago, you founded the Virginia Cardinals. And
so
there's some nuance in this. There's some differences to the beginning days of Virginia Cardinals versus 99% of the other clubs. Maybe tell us the parts that you're comfortable with, and because there might be somebody out there who's thinking along the same lines and maybe has some of those similar resources.
Right. Yeah, well, it kind of grew out of a little bit of necessity. I was doing the academy. The way things were structured at that point is there were a couple of elite travel teams in the area that, I would train kids and work with kids, and they'd go play for some travel team. We didn't do travel teams at the time. We were an instructional academy. That changed over time. People wanted to have in-house teams that they could play for. So, almost all of the academies morphed into having travel teams out of necessity, because otherwise you lose all your kids, and people who do teams wind up saying, well, no, you got to come here for your lessons and so on and so forth. And it's like, it dries up. So out of necessity, we were going to form teams. The Cardinals came about a little bit differently. I had, prior to that, been sending my kids to go play for the Canes or go play for the Richmond Braves or go play for some other outfit that might have been in the area. Really, it was just the Canes and the Braves at that time. When the Braves were pretty established and the Canes were just starting out, and they only had one or two teams, which is hard to believe now, knowing how big the Canes are. But Jeff Petty had the one team out of Fredericksburg, and mostly Virginia kids, and I used to send guys his way. And of course, this was not their issue. It was a different team that I will not mention that caused me to get into the travel game. It was not the Braves or the Canes, so I'm going to say that out loud. I had a kid who played for me, or not played for me, but took lessons from me. And I thought a lot of this kid. He was a high academic student, great kid, and a good baseball player. And he had an opportunity to go to an elite university on a full academic scholarship to be an engineer. And he wasn't quite good enough to play baseball at that particular school, but, he was going to get a free engineering degree from a high-level university. He instead wound up getting talked into taking a baseball scholarship at a school that he could have gotten into with half of his GPA and half of his SAT score, and for a 25% baseball scholarship. But because, he had an emotional attachment with the coach, they trusted him, they trusted his advice. He talked about, the experience. And listen, I love baseball, okay?
Sure.
I love the game. But you don't make that choice, okay? And I'll be honest with you, man, I was fired up. I was really almost offended by that advice. And I swore to myself, like, this needs to stop. Especially, I can't save the world, but I can definitely try to help my kids. And my kids being, my baseball kids. And I would never allow a kid to make that choice. Our credo, our motto has always been to use baseball as a key to open a door that you probably couldn't have opened without baseball, not to go in the other direction, not to pass up opportunities that are great opportunities in order to just play baseball in college. It's not worth it. Okay. So anyway, that kid, fast forward, he goes to that school. He has a nice career. He plays. He's not an engineer, he's not an engineer today. He wound up just, getting a degree and then getting a job. And, I hope to God he has a happy life, and I'm sure he'll be just fine, but his life is completely different. And I don't think it's in a better way. The doesn't mean he's not going to be happy and, be a good dad or whatever. But, I couldn't watch it. So anyway, all of that was the motivation. I can't do this anymore. I got to change. I got to have a team. I got to make sure my best players, my elite players, don't get that kind of advice ever again. So I'm not allowed to reveal who it is, but there was a person that I didn't realize who had come through our academy, who is a hundreds of multi-million dollars. Had no idea. I just did lessons with their kid. And, in conversation and throughout the years, there were times when we had conversations about how their life is going. The kid was a good kid, but had a tendency to get into a little bit of trouble. And so we had a conversation, and I gave him a little bit of advice. Well, I think you should take him out of that school because it's full of problems, and put him in that school if you have the resources, ironically. It's hilarious now that I said that to them. Hey, if you have the resources, they could have bought the school, all right? Yeah. So anyway, they took the kid, sent him to Fort Union for a year, straightened him out, brought him home. They're like, well, listen, I can't send him back to public school. What do you think I should do? You know him. Where do you think he would thrive? So I gave them a recommendation of what private school to send him to here. And they did. And, of course, that money, it's so ironic we're having this conversation right now because that person's company just drove past me. Yeah. That's hilarious. They are worldwide, and they just drove past me. All right. So anyway, he went on, had a great private school career, wound up going to college, wasn't working out at the school it worked out at. I helped him get him to another school, again, having no idea still who these people are because they had a different last name in their company. And then when it all worked out in the end and everything happened and he graduated from college and he's all happy, the person came to me and said, thank you so much for the advice. We really appreciate it. What can we do for you? And I just kind of joked. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They said, well, if you could do anything, what would you want to do? And I said, well, if I could do anything, I would run a travel team. This was the same year that other kid had picked the wrong school, in my opinion. So I said to them, if I could do anything at all, I'd run a travel team, and that was just based on merit, that you couldn't buy your way on it. It didn't cost you anything. We'd run it like a college program where we stayed together, we traveled together, and, it would be a training ground for college baseball for these kids. And the person was like, well, tell me how much that's going to cost you. And I laughed, and I told them. And they were like, okay, I'll fund the team for 3 years, and it will cost them nothing. And in that 3 years, by the end of that 3 years, you should be able to build up, what I said, I should have been able to build up enough of alumni support who would turn around and pay it forward so that I could keep this running. And then over the years, it would just keep growing as far as, the philanthropic giving of those who benefited from it. That's what I thought would happen. Of course it didn't. I love the kids who played for me. I love the families who've been involved. But the fact of the matter is, once people get what they want from you, they keep moving. And, not often do people turn around and give back to anyone, let alone even a group that is very helpful to you. So those first 3 years, kids didn't have to pay anything. The goal, and like I told people, it's free. It doesn't cost anything, but it's not free. I'm going to come ask you for a donation 3-4 years from now, and I'm going to want you to help out. And, had that model worked and had people given back, it would still be free, but It didn't, and it's too bad because, I've had a handful of kids who played for me over the years whose parents could fund this team and not even think about it, all by themselves. And, it's people make choices, man. And I hear people talk about it all the time of, wanting to have the right to choose who they support and who they benefit. And, really what people want to do is just keep what they got. And that's okay. Lesson learned, I had to change the model. I don't just do one team anymore because it's not sustainable. The nature of the game, these kids get into organizations, and it's not like I don't like going around and trying to recruit kids off other teams. That's not what I enjoy doing, and it's not what I want to do. So what I want to do is develop kids from a younger age, take them to that elite level and bring them through. So, we've expanded the Cardinal rosters. We used to just do one team completely, just one team. Now I just do one team at each age level from junior year down through 8th grade year. Because we figure, you got to get them in the program. You got to get them learning how to do it the right way. And then hopefully they continue to develop and become, that elite player as a sophomore and junior. So that's the new model now, and that's kind of how we roll.
That was right about the time where I sort of started getting to know you a little better. Was right in the inception of the Cardinals, and I knew many of those families in the early years very, very well. You had some very good people. And the thing, when you say it's not going to cost you anything, but it's not free, one of the things that was always interesting and quite honestly, I think it was necessary, were some rules that you had in place back then. If you're going to play for me and not pay anything, you got to follow my rules. And that's part of I've actually talked about it on this show quite a bit. Everybody complains about the money that travel baseball costs. The reality is, I think we could. I think there's plenty of ways to fundraise and cover the cost for every single kid out there, right? With some professional fundraising. But the problem is, then you run into this problem where there's no skin in the game, and so you created a way for them to have skin in the game. That was the rules. And if I'm not mistaken, some kids broke some rules and they were no longer on the team.
Sure, I joke around that I have cut more first-round draft picks, I think, than anybody in the country. Yeah. I mean, it happens. That you're right. The rules I had were pretty simple, though. It was, number one, I don't want to talk to any parents. The boys at this point, they were sophomores and juniors. Okay, so they're older now. I'm not talking about a 12U team of having to handle their business like young men. But as a sophomore and a junior in high school, you got to be the guy.
Yeah.
And, so that was the first rule, like, don't talk to me. No, I mean, we can converse.
Yes.
Adult to adult, parent to parent. We can, hey, great weather, nice game today, yada, yada, yada. How about those Patriots? But, you're not going to let me know, hey, Johnny's not going to be at practice tonight. Like, well, Johnny needs to be telling me that.
Exactly.
And that was kind of the thing. Children, the boys, the players, they're not even children, they're young men. They need to start taking control of this situation. My philosophy that I tell kids all the time is, you are only going to go as far in this life as you're willing to advocate for yourself. Mm-hmm. So I understand the conversation may be difficult, but that's why you need to have it. Have the conversation with me. Don't think I'm not going to say no to your dad. I will. I have no problem saying no to your dad. Right. It's easy for me to say no to your dad as it is to say no to you, because the answer is no. You're not going to miss that tournament. No, you're not going to take a vacation in the middle of our season. No.
Which was the next rule that I used to love, was that if you're going to play for the Cardinals and it's going to be no cost to mom and dad, you're not going to miss anything. You have to commit.
Nothing.
You have to commit to us, because if you commit and then miss, you're taking the roster spot of somebody else that could have committed. And
exactly. Well, that too, and so that extends to, like, even things like the pitchers, the POs, the guys who only pitched. Like, no, you don't just show up, pitch your game, and then go home. Back then we traveled together. We traveled in vans. Kids shared rooms together. They learned how to shut the door correctly in a hotel, how to not talk in an elevator, how to be quiet. I used to tell these guys all the time, you are not as funny and entertaining as you think you are.
Yes.
Right? Real adults, real people think you're obnoxious.
Yes.
Just be quiet.
Yes.
Right? Be quiet. Doesn't mean you have to be silent, but you have to be quiet.
Yeah.
You have to be considerate.
Yes.
And we used to get, I'll tell you, man, I loved it because it was, we did it the right way. And I would go to check out from the hotel to go pay the bill, and I'd have people at the front desk being like, this is the best team we've ever had here. Your kids are polite. They were, they handled their business. The rooms were even clean. I'm like, holy crap, I'll take that. It was the best compliments I ever got. And it extended into, after 4 or 5 years later, hearing back from college coaches saying, I'm going to tell you something. If there's one thing that we know when we get a Cardinal, is that he's ready to be in college. Now, listen, I can't attest that that's the case anymore today. All right. Because it's different. Brad Mars and I, who started this team, have had that conversation. Like, we look back 10 years when we started this thing, and there might be 1 or 2 parents at our tournament games. Maybe, the kids would just come, the parents would, live their lives. And there might be 1 or 2 parents showing up. Now every kid travels, and we try to do our best, to keep the costs down by, being conscious of travel and encouraging people to listen, like, carpool together, like, stay together, you know.
Yeah.
But they don't, man. Everybody shows up. It's like they're not allowed to miss a game.
I know.
The parents show up at every single game. They show up at practices sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as it used to be, but you know, sometimes I remember a couple of years ago, we were going to practice, and like every parent is there watching practice. Like, why are you here watching practice?
Incredible.
You know, drop your kid off, go run an errand. You know, go do something. And you know, come back and pick him up if he can't drive himself. So anyway, it's different, man.
Well,
it's all changed. And
there's a different dynamic when you've earned your way onto this club, and you can, for lack of better terms, you can be replaced because you're not paying anything. Versus you're just another customer, and guess what? The customer is always right, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is going to be a different dynamic, you know, in those two models. Now, to go back a little ways, and obviously the model didn't work. It didn't self-sustain. That was an awesome idea. But what those first 3 years did for you was jumpstart a pretty darn good reputation and a pretty darn good program, because like you alluded to earlier, you went down and won the World Wood Bat in Fort Myers at the 16U just a couple years into existence, and that's no small feat, and that's just a testament to putting together.
That was a special group, though, man. Yeah,
you put together a strong team. You know, listen, it's no secret. You were able to cherry pick some pretty darn good talent. When you say, hey, do you want to come play here for free? I mean, that's, I do.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll tell you this, though. Yeah, there's no doubt. But I would say that what's funny is that I still have kids who are on scholarship, Richie, and there's still kids who can't afford it.
Sure.
And, you know, there's never been a kid who didn't play for the Cardinals because they couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
So the money hasn't wound up costing me any kids that I can tell. I mean, maybe people don't come to the tryout, but there hasn't been anybody that's made the cut that then saw the sticker price and was like, nah, I can't do it.
Yeah,
you know? So for me, I'd say the thing that's affected probably our ability to be, and at that time we were a top 10 team in the country. And, you know, for back-to-back years, you know, that year we won the underclass, we were the third-ranked team in the nation by PG. The year before that, though, we were ninth. And, you know, we were still really good. The difference now is the fact that I don't just do one team.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if I took every one of my teams, all four of them, and I just put one team together of all the best players from all four of those teams, we're right back where we started. So I don't know if it's the money that's changed anything. I think it's the structure of having to do four teams for sustainability.
Yeah.
The free part would make it was really just a way for me to kind of be a bit of a tyrant. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a way to be like, nope, it's going to be this way, and we're not even going to talk about it. It's just going to be like this. And people were like, okay, because it was free. All right. Now everybody, because they write a check, they think their opinion is valid.
Of
and
course.
It's not. You know, it's not. It doesn't mean these people don't mean well,
right.
But it's like you write a check, you think you have a say, and you don't. And so that part is a little bit different. So I wouldn't say that what I meant was it got you in the door on year one when really nobody had any expectations. And in year one, year two, year three, when you say, hey, do you want to play for me, to some of the best kids in the state, because it was just kids in state, that got you in the door right away. Right away. It did. You know, I mean, that first year especially, because my model was to not take anybody who was already playing for somebody else. Now, you couldn't do that today because everybody's playing for somebody.
Sure.
But back then, there was still only a couple shows in town. There was still just a handful of teams, and very few of them were quote unquote elite. So, you know, there was the Braves, there was the Canes, and really that was it. So there was room for a third. And, you know, that first year, I didn't get any kids from other teams. You know, I got most of those kids were RBA kids,
right?
RBA South kids. There was one kid who came from across the river, Gary LeClaire, came from the West End, came our way. And then I held an open tryout and advertised for it on the web boards. But, you know, so we had 15 kids on that team, but 10 of them were RBA South kids.
Yeah.
5 of them were from outside the area.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of them was one of the greatest Cardinals we ever had, a kid named Josh Gardner from Eastern View up in Culpeper.
Yeah.
It wasn't Eastern View. It was
Mountain View.
Was it Eastern View? Mountain View. He's from Culpeper. He's from one of those schools up there. He was awesome. He was one of the greatest Cardinals we ever had. Yep. And he just showed up at a tryout.
Yep.
And I was like, who is this kid who's like 5'8", throwing 90 miles an hour off the mound, hitting bombs, running like a 6'5"?
Yep.
I'm like, good Lord, who is this kid?
Yep.
And, he was awesome. Didn't say 3 words in the 3 years I had him. Very quiet, and just best player on the field every time we went out there. It was impressive. So you're right. I mean, that helped because there wasn't – it was easy to get yeses, right? It was easy to get yeses. But I'll be honest with you, even since then, the yes rate to play for the Cardinals is probably still 90%, 95%. I mean,
wow.
We're pretty fortunate. We're very lucky. I think people like what we do, and they realize it's going to cost some money. But no matter where you go, you're going to have to pay something. I guess we could probably be vulnerable if a free team came around. But there's a couple out there that I know, but they're a little smaller outfits, self-funded. It helps to have the reputation and have had a lot of good relationships with the college coaches. And, so many kids have moved on to play in Division I baseball and Division III baseball around here and getting drafted. I mean, that's how it works. That's how it works for all these teams. You really you can get away with it for a couple of years. You can hide for a couple of years and fake it, but not for 10, 10 years. You gotta actually be delivering.
Well, the model started out, I mean, it's a great model. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody else tries to do a self-sustaining model like that. I still believe that the fundraising opportunities are available, but again, if there's no skin in the game, I think could be worse than having mom and dad have to pay. Cutting the costs,
no, I agree.
Making things free is phenomenal. But then the skin in the game concept, for this thing, I could see it getting out of hand.
Well, if it's free, you don't own it.
You don't own it.
You got to have ownership.
They get upset about something, the smallest little thing, they'd be gone. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And then
that's kind of how it works.
You've invested this time and effort and somebody's money. Anyway, listen, I think there's something there. It'd be interesting to kind of keep an eye out to see what some other people are doing. I know there's some other clubs out there, but not many. Perhaps somebody can fact check me. Isn't that sort of what the Midland Redskins have done forever? Isn't that a free team, sort of out of Ohio?
There's some teams that are, I know that the Canes' top team is free, but I assume it's paid for by the other teams that are paying. But I probably shouldn't speak to that because I don't know the model, but I know the Canes' top team is free, and you can get away with that. You can do that if you have a big enough organization, for sure. You can fund. For me, could I go out and fundraise, $50,000 a year in order to make it free for everybody? I could, but you know what? I'm not a professional fundraiser.
Right.
Nor
exactly.
do I want to be. Nor do I think that, I frankly, this might sound awful. I'm doing enough for your kid, right? I'm doing enough by coaching him. I'm doing enough by giving him honest feedback and advice and guidance. I don't also need to then pay for you too. I don't need to go out and use my contacts and my capital and my favors in order to make it free for you just because you don't want to pay.
I got it, man.
I mean,
I'm with you.
That's not okay.
Well, think about, and this is the perspective I look at, is this thing, and I've talked about this on the show several times. This thing is not an investment. It's not. It's a hobby. And hobbies cost money. And when people get upset about this baseball hobby being expensive, I just remind them that their kid, could be into equestrian. Or right?
There's more expensive things out there. Absolutely.
In the grand scheme of things, baseball's not that expensive compared to, let's just say your kid comes home and wants to be a world-class fly fishermen? Or
right.
Do you know what you have to buy a kid when he wants to wakeboard? You have to buy him a boat.
Right.
You have to buy the
boat,
kid a boat.
$50,000 boat.
A boat.
Yeah.
Okay? Right? So now all of a sudden, baseball's not that expensive, is it? Right? So that's I try to remind myself, I try to remind, parents who are really complaining about it. In the grand scheme of things, it's not. It's just another hobby. And if you weren't doing this hobby, you'd probably be doing a more expensive hobby.
Yep.
So
good point.
Anywho, listen, I know we're butting up to. You may have lessons coming up. If you want to check your watch and tell me what we have for time here before I ask any more questions.
I'm running out of it.
Okay, listen.
Let's do one more question.
Well, oh man, okay. Give me the speed round on my normal question. I usually will ask people for, what their thoughts on the current state of travel baseball, and give me the the good, the bad, and the ugly. But feel free to go speed round on that with some positives and some maybe places for opportunities for improvement.
Well, it's definitely changed a lot since we got into it. The perfect game, Behemoth, has done nothing but get bigger and stronger. But now there's a new kid on the block with PBR who's taken over their facility down in Lake Point, and they're running those big national events. Travel baseball, frankly, it's an industry. It's an industry now.
Yeah, huge.
And there's no two ways about it. It's huge. And there's a lot of people making a living doing it, and there's a lot of people making a lot of money doing it. And there's a little bit of a difference between those two types of people. Like I tell people all the time, I do this for a living, but I don't do it for the money. I can make a lot more money doing other stuff.
Yeah.
But I do really enjoy it. That part of it, the big organization part of it, as far as these behemoth teams that, that's what's changed since 10 years ago, is that the model seems to be for some of these organizations to acquire as many teams all over the country as they can and become a big, U.S. Elite Baseball or Team Elite or the Canes or whatever. They have all of these teams all over the place. And that's fine. That's one model. I couldn't imagine doing that. I mean, I have no interest in doing that. I want to be able personally, this is just personal and doesn't mean it's better. It's just my feeling. I like to be able to go watch my kids play.
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to go around and go to these events and scout kids and then poach them from other teams. I like watching my players play and, then being able to give them some feedback or being there when a scout shows up or a college coach shows up and they have questions about the kid. I like to be able to answer those questions because I know the kid and I know the family and I know their situation. And, I like that fact that, if a coach comes up and asks me who this kid's parents are, I can answer the question, because I know who they are. I've seen them before and, I know what they do for a living and I know what their financial situation is and the academic situation. And, it helps with being able to advise these people on where good fits are for them. So, the growth of travel baseball into becoming as big and corporate as it is good and bad. It's good because it legitimizes things and stabilizes things in a lot of ways. And then you have like everybody knows that your perfect game and your PBR scouting reports and rankings and stuff are legitimate. They're good. They have no benefit. PBR and perfect game have no benefit in lying about your 60 time or your arm speed. And that's great. It's great that coaches have that as a resource. See, I don't know how necessary it is as much as it used to be 5 years ago with the technology coming into baseball the way it is now. I have a Rapsodo machine now. Here at the Academy, we have hit tracks. We've got blast motion that we use. So now the data piece of it, we actually have in-house. We don't have to send a kid necessarily to an individual showcase, maybe for his 60 time. But, to be able to communicate with a college coach or a professional scout about who this kid is, in his measurables helps, so you don't necessarily have to have all of these other things out there. I have found, and that was a big part of the conversation I had with Coach Stifler at the VCU hitting cage the other night. He was asking me for a little bit of feedback on the technology piece and what we use here, because, they got to make some big decisions in this next year, what direction they're going to go in. And I told him, hit tracks is awesome, and blast motion is awesome. And combining those two things together, which you can do, solves it all. You were able to really, teach kids how to improve the metrics of their swing, and then at the same time, you're getting immediate feedback from the HitTrax machine, and all of this is really helpful as far as player development goes. Now, what's funny is that, data is taking over the game in a lot of ways. And same thing with the Rapsodo machine. I'm able to reach out to Coach Kuhn at Radford or, Coach O'Connor at UVA and tell them, this kid threw X miles an hour, his spin rate is this, his axis is, and so that's universal. They know what those numbers mean. So the recruiting part and the evaluation part has become easier. But with all that, you lose a little bit of the sniff test, the eyeball thing,
yes.
The thing that that you see, that people who know the game know what they're looking at, right? So, I tell the story all the time about how Nathan Kirby wound up at UVA. They fell in love with him, watching him pitch. He was on that first team I had, and we went and played against Baseball U at UVA, and I figured I'm going to start this lefty who throws, at the time, 88. They're going to love him. He's a sophomore in high school. He goes out there, can't get out of the first inning. Couldn't get out of the first inning. And it wasn't because he was doing poorly. He just couldn't catch a break. Broken bat, bleeder, hit batter, walk, error. Boom, 5 runs in the first inning, couldn't finish the inning. So I had to come take him out of the game. And in the parking lot on the way out, I had no relationship with UVA at the time. Coach O'Connor comes running down the stairs to catch me in the parking lot to tell me how much they loved Nathan Kirby. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? The kid didn't get out of the first inning. But I'll tell you what, Rich, in that moment, I'm like, these guys know what the hell they're doing, right? So if you can watch that kid and know that eventually in 2015 he's going to strike out Dansby Swanson and you're going to win the first national championship in the history of UVA baseball, right? You can see that when he's a sophomore in high school and couldn't get out of the first inning.
Yeah.
Well, that's the piece that's never going to go away,
yeah.
right? And because what they loved about the kid was his competitiveness.
Yeah.
He kept wanting the ball. He kept fighting. He kept going. Like, that's the thing that you can't measure.
Yeah.
That doesn't show up on your Rapsodo.
Rapsodo doesn't measure that yet.
No. So there's, thank God, there's always going to be a space. There will still always be a space in the game for somebody who knows what the hell they're looking at, right? But this other stuff helps. Okay, this other stuff helps kind of put some definition on it, put a number on it. Same thing with travel baseball and the way it is. These tournaments help, these rankings help. But basically it's a matter of, are you legitimate or not legitimate? And once you have that answer, the rest of it is going to be kind of personal evaluation. So, what's the state of travel baseball today? It's growing. It's a pain in the ass, but it is what it is, man, and we're just going to kind of keep dealing with it.
Well, I wanted to get talking. The next question was going to be about different events, smaller events, but we'll leave that to our next conversation.
I'll answer that. You know what? I'll answer that real quick, Richie, because
okay.
I'll tell you that's the part that, I do my own events. I got the idea from John Wells, who runs Baseball U.
Yep.
He did a firecracker event down at North Carolina one year and was nice enough to invite me early in our existence. And I was like, this is great. This is what it needs to be. Having 6 or 8 teams, all of which are good.
Yes.
All of which are the teams that coaches actually want to see.
Yep.
Playing against each other on the main stage. That's it. Like those are the only events I want to do anymore.
Yeah.
There aren't that many of them out there. I run one myself at Virginia Tech. But then I try to make sure the other events I'm in are just like that.
Yeah.
And because otherwise it can be a waste of time, man. You go out, some of these outfits, tell you there's a tournament at XYZ University, and you go out there and you get one game at that field, and then you get 3 other games in a cow pasture somewhere 30 miles away with no coaches there. Against Frank, and this is the most frustrating part, against a team that has no right being out there.
Yeah.
You can't evaluate an elite player against a kid who isn't even a rec ball player. And, so that's the tough part. Now, fortunately, I've been really lucky and fortunate that, when I do events with outfits out there like Dynamic Baseball or Impact Baseball, they've been really good to me and treat my team very well with a lot of respect, and they give us good venues and we play good teams. So, it's not those groups that are doing it to me, but there's groups out there that just have no right doing it, and or teams that don't belong out there. But they'll take their check, they'll take their money, And I get that. So as a business,
yes,
it makes sense. But as a fan of the game, or as somebody who wants to do an effective model for recruiting, you can't play against bad players and bad teams. You just can't. You need to be out there playing teams that are going to test you, that are going to push you, that are going to give the other coaches an idea of what they're looking at and what your kid's going to look like against another elite player, because that's all they're going to face in college.
Yeah.
So, I started doing those events years ago. I used to do 3 or 4 a year, but, it got tough because the colleges started to see how much money these tournament outfits were making and jacked the rates up. And, so now the fact that I'm only going to do an event at the main stadium, when you think about what you have to pay to use the main stadium for a weekend, in order to not lose money, you generally have to use these high school fields around and have whatever B-site games
and have 20
in
teams
order to pay for it.
Yeah, and have 20 or 30 teams, yeah.
Or 80, right?
Yeah, sure.
So, but I can't. So fortunately, Virginia Tech has been awesome working with me and keeping our event alive there, our Super Six event that we do. It's called Super Six. There's no actual Super Six company, but it's basically 6 good teams at Virginia Tech all weekend long. And, we've done that every year for, I think, 6 years now. Started it with Pete Hughes, and Pete Hughes was there. And it's been awesome, so I'll keep doing that event as long as they'll keep having me. And, if there's another venue that wants to have us in there that has turf, wants to give us the whole weekend and not have to work around 3 of their practices and only be able to get on the field for like 2.5 hours, but charge for a whole weekend, like that arrangement doesn't work. So
yeah. Have you? I'm assuming you've run into that, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I love it.
Pay full price.
When I first started getting into this world in this space 11 years ago, you would see events that had 10 or 12 teams. Talking about like Jeff Roberts with D1 Draftable.
Yep.
And you go up and it would be all at VMI or all at JMU, and one high school 1 mile down the road. And then
right.
And listen, it's nobody's fault if more teams are out there and more teams want to be in it. And then all of a sudden, 10 years later, there's 50 teams in an event. I mean, I can't fault the guy, but if I'm running the team, I don't necessarily want to be in that event with 49 other teams. I'm going to go find 5 other like-minded guys who have similarly competitive teams. I'm going to go play on one field. We split umpires. We bring baseballs. It's a pennies on the dollar compared to playing in a big tournament. And oh, by the way, if you do it in the right place, mom and dad are all sleeping at home that night. And I think honestly, I think that's the model for the fall is in the fall we do it much differently. Yeah.
In the fall it's much smaller, and we're trying to get there midday on a Saturday and be home by Sunday evening.
Yeah. And
that's definitely a better approach because they got school to deal with as well. So you're right. And I'll tell you what, the thing that I've liked, and I hope it continues, is the shrinking of the fall. The NCAA has shrunk the fall to about a month now, 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it was 4 weeks long this fall. That's enough. In my mind, that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
And if they could shrink it to 0, I'd be okay with that. I think these kids need time to refresh. They need time to train. They need time to, do other sports, but if it's going, you got to be there.
Yeah.
If there's stuff going on, you got to participate, or frankly, right or wrong, people are going to recruit against you about it. Like, oh, they don't even travel in the fall. It's like,
I know.
We shouldn't,
Well, you look up and people are
hopefully
people are signed up for events right now during dead periods.
That's crazy.
Fourth of July tournaments this year are not going to really be recruited very much, but there's
all.
But
right.
there's still a lot of teams.
We worked around.
There's still teams.
I know.
Still teams playing.
Dude, they put dead periods on 2 weekends that are 4 weeks apart. Like, there's just big holes in the middle of the summer schedule, and that's okay. It works for the college coaches. It gets everybody off the road for a few days. But instead of people just taking time off, they move tournaments to be midweek now.
Yeah.
So now people are going to be missing work in the middle of the summer. It's like, man, there's no right way to do it. You know, there's always going to be an issue, and like anything else, the more you try to fix it, the more it just turns into cobblestone highway. You know, it's just nothing but bumps and grooves.
Well, listen, we went about 15 minutes too long. I think I got you fired up there at the end. All of this, I mean to say this at the beginning, but all of this is going to be at playinschool.com/Graham. You can share it with your friends. My friends and your friends will both listen. Your friends,
all 6 of them.
Your old friends will come out of the woodwork and give you shit for being on this. They'll think they'll expect to be called names like Hollywood, and other fun terms of endearment. So I appreciate you coming on, man. This was a lot of fun. I apologize for keeping you 16 minutes too long.
You're good, baby.
So
you're good, man.
I'll see you soon.
All right, Richie. Take care, man.
Later.
Bye.
I'm having so much fun bringing these shows to you each week. If you'd like to recommend a coach for the show, please don't hesitate to shoot me a note at rich@playinschool.com or DM me on Twitter @playinschool. Again, my name is Rich Prado. I'm the founder of Play in School. My goal is to continue to create products and services that add value to you, the travel ball coaches, your players, and their parents. Visit playinschool.com to see some of the ways we're doing that. Or better yet, let's set up a call. Until next time, thank you for listening to Travel Ball Talk.